Good evening, colleagues, students, and members of the legal profession. I'm Dr. Jacques Mattia. I'm the Vice Dean for Learning, Teaching, Innovation, and Digitalization in the Faculty of Law. And tonight, I'm joined by my colleague, Advocate Ines Besaidnout, and our distinguished guest, whom I will introduce shortly. It is our pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, AI and the Law, Understanding Risks and Responsible Adoption in Legal Practice. As we know, artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming the way legal services are delivered, researched, and managed worldwide. As legal practitioners, academics, students, we are increasingly required not only to understand these technologies, but also to engage critically with the opportunities and the ethical challenges they present. Today's discussion, therefore, comes at a particularly important moment for the legal profession. Now, we are privileged tonight to be joined by Judge Henk Roelofse, whose professional career spans litigation, judicial service, and legal innovation. Admitted as an advocate in 2003, Judge Roelofse has practiced extensively at both the Pretoria and Mpumalanga bars, appearing in a wide range of civil and criminal matters. During his judicial service, Judge Roelofse authored numerous judgments, several of which were reported in the official law reports. His experience on the bench has provided him with deep insight into the practical demands of judicial reasoning, consistency, accountability, and the administration of justice within a constitutional legal order. In addition to his judicial and advocacy work, Judge Roelofse is also the founder and creator of Ask Cecile, a global artificial intelligence platform aimed at expanding access to reliable legal information across more than 200 countries and in over 70 languages, as well as Ask Cecile Pro, a professional AI-assisted legal research and drafting platform for practitioners. His work reflects a thoughtful and principled engagement with the intersection between law, technology, access to justice, and professional ethics. Few individuals are as well positioned to guide us through the opportunities and challenges posed by artificial intelligence in legal practice. Please join me in welcoming Judge Roelofse. Judge, it is really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jacques. It's indeed a privilege and a big honor to both be with you. I know that this is a first-time thing, and I've heard tonight it's the first night broadcast.
Yes.
So it's so awesome, and thank you for the introduction. You know, fate and circumstances has brought me on this incredible journey to discover things I never knew I would discover. And you know, a discovery causes things to change. But only if your eyes are open to the opportunities the discovery brings you. And in a short while, I've discovered amazing things and things that will shape the future of how we practice. And I'm so honored that people are listening because it's so difficult.
Yeah.
To get an audience that listens, because some of these things are very difficult to understand. So fate has brought me here. I truly believe that. Circumstances and also this amazing discovery. It all started, let me just say this, it all started when I wanted to help a colleague who is visually impaired. The court system changed to case lines and everything is now digital. So what happened is that I saw the case lines gives you documents in PDF, and this visually impaired colleague, the reader that he uses can only read Word documents. So when this change came, he could not read papers. So there was a big screen in his office, and his registrar stood at the screen and had to read every word. And I asked him if this is difficult. Of course, he said it's extremely difficult, it takes time. And that was the amazing moment of discovery. That through helping him by making technology that could change the way the documents are presented through optical character recognition, you will hear about that tonight. I could give an opportunity and also a solution, and that was the starting point of this real big discovery. So let me get into this. We are going to speak about AI and legal practice. It's a practical guide for legal professionals. I'm not saying lawyers or judges, but legal professionals. So people that gave a large chunk of their lives to get legally qualified and use it now in their life, like prosecutors, magistrates, and so forth. So it's a practical guide. You will see a black background. It's just a joyful play to a school board of the old days. So I want to focus the attention that we are moving away from the old and we have to engage with the new. So the key observation is that you do not need any technical background to benefit from this discussion. I will take you through some of the principles the best I can, the way I understand it, which might be wrong or may be right. We'll see. It is for practicing attorneys, advocates, paralegals, legal academics, students, and also, of course, prosecutors and the like. And you need no prior knowledge of AI. Now, no discussion about AI can start without discussing where it comes from. So it's described nowadays in the modern age as the fourth industrial revolution. I don't think it's industrial. I think it's a software and networking revolution. We have seen the changes when internet came many years ago, and you all remember the dial-up modems that made ping, 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 and all sounds, and you could only send a message. But now look what has happened in only a few years. Information is everywhere, and it affects all our lives, even if you use a cell phone. So the fourth industrial revolution is a revolution of software and networking, and it is this situation where we fit in.
Yeah.
Because we are in the knowledge economy. Now let's think about this. There is an economy of natural resources, gold, silver, and things that we know. But we are in an age of knowledge economy. And we as lawyers sell our knowledge. We do not sell gold and silver. We want to make it, but we don't sell it. So if artificial intelligence therefore impacts upon the knowledge economy, we must be very aware of it. You will see through my presentation and the research how it will impact in the very near future on all of us. So I say that insight is there's no way we can stop AI. It's a tsunami. People warn against it. People are not truthful. Many people will say, no, I don't use it, but they use it. So it's a tsunami we will never stop. It is an intersection between how we did things and how we now have to do things. And if there is an intersection between 2 points, something is bound to happen at the intersection point. Perhaps it's an interception. Now, inception and intercept is 2 different things. Intercept is to destroy at the inception point. So we as society have to decide. Is AI going to destroy us because it intercepts us, or are we going to destroy it? But we will not be able to, let's be honest. Okay, we cannot stop the tsunami. Topic 1, what is AI really? A practical introduction. Topic 2, key opportunities for efficiency and service delivery. Topic 3, critical risks. And here is going to be my focus. Because we do things without knowing what we do. We ask chatbots things and we upload things and we do not understand that it goes to the world. Do we question the confidentiality? And in the legal sense, do we question confidentiality and also things that are privileged? Do we not perhaps waive tacitly our privilege? And such a case was in America just a few weeks ago. Decided that the attorney that used AI, the other party heard about it, that attorney tacitly waived the privilege, and the other party was entitled to all the information. So I'm going to dwell on that. Important thing is bias. I will give you very potent examples, and then the reliability. We all heard about hallucinations.
Yeah.
That is reliability. And then we are going to speak about ethics, how to use what is responsible AI use in the legal practice, and what strategies we will have to use to adopt to it. And then there will be a question and answer session. So, topic 1. What is AI really? Now, in order to decide and understand what AI is, that is artificial intelligence, we need to understand what is intelligence. Because only if we understand the concept of intelligence, we will understand what artificial intelligence is. So there should be a natural intelligence and an artificial intelligence. And are these two things the same? Let's discuss normal intelligence. It's the ability to collect knowledge in order to survive and adapt. That is intelligence. The ability to get information to survive and adapt. So what is artificial intelligence? The Oxford Dictionary is as follows. And this is also where the lights went on for me, because of the touch points. Oxford says the wide official definition of intelligence, artificial intelligence, is a field of computer science focused on building smart systems that can perform tasks typically requiring human intelligence, such as learning, reasoning, and problem solving. The capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior. Now, there's the key. Do not think that a computer is intelligent. It simulates intelligence. It makes you believe that it is intelligent. It is not. I will tell you why. And when I say that, you must already immediately understand that humans will always be in the loop, because a computer simulates intelligence but does not display true intelligence, and I will explain this to you. But what is really profound is the definition where it intersects with what we do as lawyers. Learning, reasoning, and problem solving. Now, is that not awesome? We as attorneys, we learn. As lawyers, we learn. First at university, then we learn facts and we learn the law, the entire span of our careers. So we never stop learning. Then we have to take what we have learned and reason with that which we have learned. We have to reason, this is the law, and reason the law, and then also reason the facts and see how we can use the one with the other. So it's reasoning. And then why does a client come and see you? It's to solve a problem. That is it. And disputes goes to attorneys and to courts and so on for one reason, and it is to resolve that dispute. If there was no disputes ever, there would be no courts, there would be no attorneys. But let me say this, if there were no self-interest, there would be no disputes. Think about that. Disputes and conflict are only fired by self-interest. But let us get back to the subject. So that is the definition. We understand that that is the touch point, reasoning, problem solving, and information. So one gets different kinds of artificial intelligence. It's artificial narrow intelligence. That's what we know now. Things like that we use every day, and sometimes we don't even know we use it. Like Google search. It is a narrow intelligence, because all it does, it takes your words, it goes and searches the internet and gives you lots of hits. That is narrow intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence, and this is where the space we are now, is where you ask the artificial intelligence something and it gives you an answer. That answer is generated by the program, and that's why it's called generative artificial intelligence. It has an input and it creates an output. Then we have intelligence, super intelligence. We are still far away from there, and this is where people are concerned.
Yeah.
It is where computers will become so clever that it will overrule human. It is like intelligence that knows everything. So it is a theory, and then the last thing we get is then also agentic artificial intelligence, and that is, we see that with Copilot, where Copilot acts as your agent to read emails and distribute and whatever and decide what you need to do. So it's an agent that goes to your email and then it gets information. So that is in short. What we must understand is that artificial intelligence is not one technology. It is lots of technologies combined into one. I want to focus on optical character OCR recognition. That is where pictures and scanned documents and so forth, which comprise actually photographs or scanned images, are images are extracted and changed into, and this is important, words. And those words are changed into data. And because words are changed into data, data can be manipulated. And that is the basis of artificial intelligence in that sense. So I want to say it's different technologies, OCR, large language models. Now what is a large language model? That is the basis of every chatbot that you know. It is Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of those are large language models. There are many large language models, and the proliferation of those models started just after 2012, and I'll explain to you why. And it is free online. So you can go to a site like Hugging Face. There are many language models, and those language models all serve a different purpose. So a general language model, like that is the basis of ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and Copilot and all of those, has a general training. It is trained on billions and billions and billions of words. Then you get specific large language models that can do scientific calculations. It's trained for that. You get large language models for finances and so forth and so forth. So you get language models. It is like, let me explain like this. When you go to Toyota, you can buy a 4x4 bakkie, the base model. Its gear shift is not automatic, and it's only the bakkie without any mags. That's the basic language model. Then if you want bells and whistles, you can add mags. It will look differently, and that is language models. So you get language models that are basic, the base model, and then language models that are trained for certain purposes. And let me explain this. Let's say you are a farmer in Bethlehem or here in Bloemfontein, and you get a Toyota bakkie, but you add a canopy, but you are a sheep farmer. It will help you nothing because you want cattle rails. So just an easy example to explain that you get base models, LLMs, but you need to add bells and whistles. And that is where we very often make a mistake to think that ChatGPT is the end all. It's not. It's a general language model, and that's why it hallucinates. Same with Copilot and all of those. So what is machine learning? So first thing, I want to explain that AI is not one thing, it's a tool, it's different technologies all put together. The basis of all these AI models that we know is ChatGPT is a language model. Now, machine learning is an interesting thing because machine learning, and we'll get to that, is a computer program recognizing patterns. So it recognizes a certain pattern, and then it can predict with reasonable certainty that pattern will repeat or not repeat based on previous patterns. But I will explain that a bit later. And I've dealt with OCR. So AI is not only a chatbot, like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Copilot. This is only an interface. Now let's explain this. What you see is not the language model. What you see is not all the code. what you see is an interface. And people are very clever that design these interfaces because it engages you to fake that you are talking to a human, whereas you're talking to a machine. But you are so convinced through the clever presentation of these interfaces that you will not believe that you're not talking to a human. And because you don't believe you're not talking to a human, you do not also query the result. And that's where we make big mistakes. All right. Now, I don't know how many people are mathematicians, but this formula is the core of all language models. And this thing, what is a formula, was discovered or made in 2017 by Google scientists. And what this formula says, you will see on the left-hand side, attention equals softmax, and then the formula. Now let me tell you, every time you engage with a language model, you prompt something in that chatbot, guess what? It goes through this very same algebra function. And why could we not do it previously? It is because we did not have computing power. And it became possible with these huge manufacture of GPU cards. We had CPU, but then we had graphic processing units. Graphic processing units was always used to process videos and photographs. But because their capacity and their power is so high, they are now used to do this algebra. Okay? So I want you to understand. Attention is that made the breakthrough by Google scientists. And the paper in 2017, the name was Attention is All You Need. Because prior to this, right from the 1950s, there were already artificial intelligence that could predict the next word. So it would read certain words in sequence and it would predict the next word. But the next word was hard-coded. It means that there were lines and lines and lines of code to predict the next word. It was hard-coded. But when this came, there was a revolution because suddenly artificial intelligence and language models could understand context. It could understand the meaning of this word against that word and where it is in this model. So, just to get behind this, let me explain this, that every word, and this is how language models work, and it's important to understand this because then you will know where the problems are. Every language model consists of millions and millions of words. Each word is tokenized. So, it is not words with meaning. It is a token. And every word is broken down into a series of 6 figures. Those 6 figures are given a weight. That weight is then used and the model is trained to attribute a certain weight to these 6 figures. It's technical, but I want to explain this to you. So, this tokenized words that are tokenized are then placed in vectors. It's vectors. And it's placed on a huge, let's say, field. And each word has a vector, a position, like on a map. And the program works out what is the relative distance between the words. The closer the distance between the words, the more probable it would be that it will be in a sequence. So the words that are together are the next words. So I want you to understand that computers do not understand language. You think they understand when you type teddy bear. The computer understands you are talking about a teddy bear and you will get an answer back. But a computer do not understand words. A computer can only compute figures. So every time you put in a query, that query is broken down into words, broken down into tokens. Those tokens are given vectors, and then this calculation takes place.
If I can ask the judge then, is it then a myth that these models are learning as we go along?
It's not a myth, because learning is not in the sense that we understand learning a computer, obviously, a program picking up a book. It's not that learning. What happens is that these language models are taught and learned by giving words. One thing they do is give it weight. So learning equals, in computer language, giving something weight. And let's say it's a medical science. Then words that are used in medical science will attribute a certain weight. Another language model will not understand that weight because it was not trained. So that's the one part, Jacques. It's a very good question. The second part is that, guess what? These language models are taught by humans. I say taught in inverted commas. Have you ever seen that beneath every query in ChatGPT there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down? Okay, guess what they do? Every time you ask something, it's saved on a database. The answer that is given by the language model is saved against that question. Every time you give a thumbs up, the machine or the computer or the system learns that this is most probably a good response to that question. And so it builds a huge database of questions that are often asked, and then the answers which we as humans said it's fine. So it's basically a thumbs up is a 1. So they add it to the equation. Thumbs up is a 1, thumbs down is a 0.
And then, so it uses that data then when you
Yes.
input a next
Yes.
prompt to
Yes.
predict.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because it already knows that, oh well, humans like this answer. I don't know how to explain it. It's very technical, but as long as we know thumbs up, the machine is learning.
Yeah.
Thumbs down, it's also learning. It will reconsider that answer. All right, so some law-specific tools that are used in practice. I'm going to run through this. Harvey is American, CoCounsel is American, Lexis AI is South African and American, Westlaw is American, Kira, and then there's Cecile Pro, the solution that I developed. And there are many others. And it is growing at such rate that it's impossible to keep track. There's no uniform system. But this is a few. Now, the adoption curve. We all ask, when is all of this going to happen? And that is determined by the adoption curve. Now, there has been lots of research on this, and the research shows that 30% of all legal professionals, they understand that this is going to have a big impact upon how we practice. But the adoption, quite strangely, is the highest at big law firms in America, and the lowest in firms that are small. So then there was research why this is, and the simple answer is costs. Because big law firms can absorb the costs of giving their people access to AI. Small firms cannot, and the prices differ. Westlaw and I think Lexis AI is about $400 per month per user, which is 8,000 approximately per person. So small firms cannot afford it. Now here is the problem. Many small firms cannot afford a huge library. And this is a tool to assist those firms. But now, because they cannot afford this tool, they are also left without a big library. My mantra is that that the law is the great equalizer. If known, properly applied, and obeyed. And for all of those caveats to come true is that you must have access to the law. Now, I will deal with this, that AI and these systems indeed gives unparalleled access to the law. It is just a question of sorting out the cost barriers and so on. So the adoption of the LLM, that is Copilot and ChatGPT, was faster, and you know why? Because people use it in their everyday lives. And then because you use it to book your holiday, you easily adopt it to ask your professional question. So other technologies was slow to be adopted, but this one is extremely fast. And then besides the adoption of this by legal advisors or attorneys or lawyers, courts are also now more wary about this. In America, and we'll get to the cases, in America, some courts and jurisdictions now require that you file an additional notice explaining that, yes, I've used artificial intelligence. What paragraphs of artificial intelligence is included in your pleading or paper or opinion as they, no. Yeah, something like that in America. And then you must tell what tool you used. And that is to be transparent, because imagine that the judge does not know that artificial intelligence was used and your argument is so good that he accepts that and it goes to a judgment. And that thing never exists. So there are examples, and I will give those that want a list of all the research I did, I will give it. It can be distributed. There are forms, like a practice notes in our country, which requires a disclosure that artificial intelligence was used. So it is a first example of how the industry is trying to deal with this new technology. Okay? The question is no longer whether AI enters the legal practice, it is how and under what safeguards. We will get to that. So the takeaway is that it's there. We can do nothing about it, but now we must decide what safeguards there's going to be. Core insight, the most important thing to understand, LLM predict the next plausible word based on patterns in training data. They do not look things up the way a search engine does. Now, let's just stop here. That's why they hallucinate. Because every second of the day there are programs that scrape the internet. And they use that as their training. But they predict next words. They cannot look things up. It's not Google. There's a difference between ChatGPT and Google. That's important to understand, and that's why there are hallucinations. A majority of legal professionals expect generative AI to have a high impact on profession within 5 years.
Yeah.
The time to develop your own informed position is now, not after regulation forces it. And I will show you that perhaps the mechanisms are already there in our local code of conduct and rules. I will explain to you just now. All right. Oh, I'm going back, man, sorry. Opportunities for efficiency and service delivery, that's topic 2. Obviously, legal research will benefit through this. It's research, preparation, document drafting. All of you, man, I know you use Copilot. And I know all of us use Grammarly to check our grammar. I know that. And you must be honest, people do that. And I know people ask questions, ChatGPT. I will show you the dangers. Just now. So let's accept it. Let's not hide it. Let's be open. It's used. And then most important, it gives access to justice.
Yeah.
Because people can communicate with a system in their natural language. That can answer back in their natural language. All of us has done research on Google, and we type in legal terms and then type in softly, and then it gives us 100 results. You have to read all those results, decide which is appropriate and not, and decipher it. Tell me, a man in the street that does not even know about Safli, how is that access to the law? It's not. But the big change has come that we can communicate in a natural language, our way of speaking, with the system, and it can give us an answer in our language. So it's a big opportunity for access to justice. The traditional legal research in the wide sense on a complex matter takes 2 to 8 hours. AI-assisted research and the first draft is minutes. Then, and here is where we must understand the shift is. We are not wasting time anymore on pressing keys on a computer, because a program does that. We are now investing our professional time to check what answer is generated and to question the answer. So it generates in minutes, but then the lawyer reviews, verifies, and refines. AI can synthesize across large bodies of case law quickly, identifying trends, and not, that's a difficult word, similar cases, distinguishing authority. So within seconds, because remember, everything is turned into numbers. Numbers are computed at lightning speed, transform again to text, and you get an answer. So that is where the opportunities lie. So it's time saving. Document drafting and document review, first draft generation, AI produces a starting point. The lawyer refines. The starting point is never the end line, because you will see what happens. If you say that the starting first answer is the end line, it's not. It's the start. Document pleading review at scale, AI flags inconsistencies, and it's very good at that. All of you know that practice, how difficult it is to spot a spelling mistake. And even if you read a document 20 times and you print it, you still find spelling mistakes. AI is very good at that. It will find every single spelling mistake and it can correct it for you. Document comparison and redlining, it's again error. Looking for grammar and spelling errors, Copilot is excellent at that, and it's all included in Word. We use it and it's perfect. Time savings, that we save a significant amount of time on document review tasks. Access to justice opportunity, the access to justice gap is real. The most people with legal problems cannot afford a lawyer. And I'm not saying that there's no place for a lawyer. But is the justice that a person cannot protect his or her rights because he does not have money? How is that right? It's not right. Well, we have legal aid, but they do 900,000 cases, there it is a year. They cannot do more. And this is how Google, the correct AI systems, can assist a normal man in the street that does not have money, to at least know. The university calls it a triage.
Triage, yes.
A triage. So it can assist the person to understand, look, I've got a problem, I have to go and see an attorney because this is too difficult for me, instead of knowing nothing. Okay? AI can deliver basic legal information at scale. So, because it's AI, there's no long queue outside of an office door. No. You get immediate access. And some of the systems, the one I developed, but it's fine, it's not about the system, it's about the opportunities. Can communicate on SMS, WhatsApp, internet. So you can SMS a question and it will answer you in an SMS. So that is what I wanted to achieve. Access to justice at scale. So you can sit in a village with no money, only a few cents of airtime, and at least get an answer to your problem. And I am so grateful for that. Okay, South Africa, legal aid, I said, AI can extend that capacity significantly. So there's also practice management efficiency, like time recording, client intake. AI can sort out where a client's problem must be delegated to, what attorney, what area of law, and so on and so on. Court bundle preparation is awesome because the system that I'm testing and so forth can take 1,000 pages. I've shown Inez that. Many pages, within minutes, it can summarize, extract, index, whatever. So hours becomes minutes. Time saving. Then billing analytics. So then AI can be your agent and check the bank and all of that. So that is, I'm not going to dwell too much there. It is not the focus that I want today, but I want to get to the dangers.
Yeah.
Access to justice. Let us get to the dangers. Critical risks. Confidentiality,
Yeah.
bias, and reliability. Those are our dangers. We need to accept and we need to understand dangers because then we can do corrective action. If you do not know that a thing is dangerous, it will catch you. So let us discuss the dangers of AI. And AI that we use every day. ChatGPT, it poses a danger. Gemini poses a danger and all of those. So the first one, hallucination, confidentiality and data privacy, bias in AI systems, reliability and accuracy. Hallucination. American case, Marta versus Avianca.
Famous one.
Yeah. Now, those who don't know Marta versus Avianca, it's an easy case. A man was sitting on Avianca Air, a service trolley bumped his knee. Now, the Americans, they sue everything for anything. We will put a plaster, that man sues. But unfortunately for Mr. Marta, the airline was bankrupt. And the whole question was whether or not bankruptcy of a defendant interrupts prescription. In America, they call it something else, and they call it tolling. So it's like a toll road. Prescription is stopped, tolled. And it's about the Montreal Convention. So what happened here is, let me get to that one. And there's the South African cases, Mavundla. I'm going to speak about the English case, Maheen Park versus Davis Dennis Kim, Ayinde and Hamad. And now I included those because there is a very serious warning. I don't think we appreciate how serious the warning is of AI hallucination. And the judge there clearly set out the dangers. It's a very, very dangerous thing. Okay, now I get to that. This is what happened. Now, Mr. Swartz was the attorney in that case, Marta versus Avianca. Let me get it here. There was also a correspondent attorney, like we have it here. So Mr. Swartz could not practice in the state where this case was. So he used a correspondent. So Mr. Swartz prepared, they call it something else, heads of argument. And then he started to engage AI, ChatGPT, to be specific, on tolling and bankruptcy in terms of the Montreal Convention. Now, I want to remain on this one because I want to explain something that's really, really important. Mr. Swartz then asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT gave him answers which made him believe in the truth of those answers, and it was a lie. And the judge then saw the lie, and ultimately Mr. Marta was fined, and his correspondent $5,000. But this is where the mistake is. Let me just get to that. This is what Mr. Swartz asked ChatGPT. I wish I could get reaction, because then you will tell me, no, it's cool, or no, it's not cool, there's danger. This is his exact question. You can get these questions. It is an attachment to the case that is in the American law reports. This is what Mr. Swartz asked ChatGPT. Argue that the statute of limitations is told by bankruptcy. of defendant pursuant to Montreal Convention. Let me read it again. Argue that the statute of limitations is told by bankruptcy of defendant pursuant to Montreal Convention. Immediately you see the problem. Now ChatGPT will do what he asks.
Yes.
And he tells it, argue. So now ChatGPT does exactly what is expected of it through the prompt and argues this case. And then he said, ChatGPT said, the answer to this question depends on the laws of the country in which the lawsuit is filed. Perfect answer. So it knew, hey, be careful here. Okay? And then stated that the statute of limitations under the Montreal Convention is told by the bankruptcy filing. It did not support a cite case at that stage. So it was fine. But then Mr. Swartz asked, provide case law in support of that statute of limitations is told by bankruptcy. And just there, ChatGPT went ahead and fabricated case law.
Yeah.
Because there was something wrong from the start with the prompt. Remember, the computer does not understand language or how we humans think. It takes words, changes it to figures, and then does a mathematical calculation and comes back.
But that doesn't necessarily mean if the prompt was different, the case law would be.
No. But the
Would be
starting point
valid.
was wrong.
Yes.
He told ChatGPT to argue it. And then it argued it. And then he asked, let me show you on the screen. This is the physical screenshot of what he asked ChatGPT. Then he asked, ChatGPT gave the case. Varghese versus China Southern Airlines, wara. And he asked, is Varghese a real case? Of course ChatGPT
You
will
will
say it's a
say
real
yes.
case.
Of course.
Because it has no way to measure the truth of his answer. Because it was not trained. And then he said, yes, it's a real case. Then, this poor Mr. Swartz said, now he asked, what is your source?
Yeah.
Check. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Have you seen these words in an answer?
Sure.
I apologize. It happened to me many times. Upon double checking, I found that Varghese versus China so-and-so does indeed exist and can be found on legal research databases such as Westlaw and LexisNexis. It's a lie. Because the AI knew that case law is reported there and just assumed that you will find it.
But what I'm seeing from these questions that Mr. Swartz is asking is clearly he's seeing there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
Something suspicious.
Exactly.
Isn't it at this point then that one would expect of
Yes.
him to then go to the
Yes.
databases that he knows
Exactly.
and verifies?
And that is, Jacques, you should have been the judge. Because that is what the judge told him.
Oh,
But Mr. Swartz, you saw this. How did you verify your research? No, I asked ChatGPT.
so despite all the red flags, he still.
Yes. And this is a perfect example of understanding that language models cannot determine if their answer is correct. Because remember, I told you, it cannot look something up. It has no way to verify. Now we ask, are the other cases you provided fake? No.
Of course not.
It's like asking a student that you cheat. No. The other cases I provided are real and can be found in reputable legal databases such as LexisNexis and Westlaw. So this is what happened. What is the lesson? They were fined $5,000 each, the correspondent attorney, and also Mr. Swartz. The correspondent attorney was Mr. Peter Loduka. Lesson. Raw ChatGPT, ungrounded Claude, and similar tools will confabulate case citations that look authoritative, but are invented. Did you see that citation looked perfect?
Yeah.
Exactly the way American cases are cited. The AI produces these citations in the same confident tone as accurate ones. You cannot spot the problem. You cannot tell from the output alone. Every single citation from an AI tool must be independently verified in a primary legal database before use. Full stop. Okay. Parker versus Forsyth. It's a brilliant case in South African law. It is in the. It was in the regional court in Johannesburg where this attorney used ChatGPT, and it provided fake case law. Now, this is what the magistrate says. In this age of instant gratification, this incident serves as a timely reminder to at least the lawyers involved in this matter that when it comes to legal research, the efficiency of modern technology still needs to be infused with the dose of good old-fashioned independent reading. Courts expect lawyers to bring a legally independent and questioning mind to bear on especially novel legal matters, and certainly not merely repeat a parrot fashion. You know, we are not paraphrasing, or are we parrot-phrasing?
Yeah.
The unverified research of a chatbot. It seems to the court that they placed undue faith in the veracity of legal research generated by artificial intelligence and lazily omitted to verify the research. Ordinary. If the court was satisfied that attorneys had attempted to mislead the court, now here is the main thing. The consequences would have been far more grave.
Yeah.
But the court, not only would it have attracted the cause the bonis proprius against the affair relevantly, but the court would have been compelled to report the attorney's conduct to the Legal Practice Council. But fine, that's fine. Would you like to see this in a judgment? No. But we can go further. Let's say that you did not check the output. You put these things in heads of argument and you misled the court. Isn't that fraud?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be fraud. In the UK, it is considered defeating the ends of justice.
Yes.
Sure.
And did you know that in the UK, the maximum sentence for defeating the ends of justice is life imprisonment?
Sure.
So I want you to understand how serious this issue is, hallucinations. Okay, let's take another case. Mavundla. Here, the principle is that it is the clerk that made the mistake. But the principal was taken, or he was sanctioned for not checking the clerk's work. And remember that our code of conduct provides that you must supervise those that work under you. Rule 57 of the code of the conduct says you shall always be truthful to the court. And you can go and read that. And that brings me to the question, do we really need other kinds of safeguards, or does the rules already provide interpreted properly for safeguards? And is that not enough? In America, they also have codes of conduct. And there they also have rules of conduct. Now think about this. Let's say ChatGPT invents facts. In terms of the code of conduct, if you do a review of some or other administrative organ's decision, you must stay within the confines of the facts of that review. Now let's say you're lazy and you ask questions on ChatGPT and it comes up with some other facts. You will be seriously disciplined. So my question, I think you should ponder over it. Is it really necessary for more rules? Or must we just apply the rules? Remember I said we must now engage this thing. And we must arrange ourselves before we are arranged by some other legislation. Imagine this, that the Department of Technology, the Department of Communication is responsible for South Africa's AI policy. Have you heard what happened 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
Or 3 weeks? They used ChatGPT or AI to write that policy. And it produced false researches. And they gave it in, never even checking that. Guess what happened? The Director Generals are on suspension. But worst, I've heard that the Department of Home Affairs also used AI to do some other policy. I will get to the danger of that. Now just imagine this, that the department that is responsible for AI policy uses AI and gets it wrong. Huh? So that is the danger.
If I can just take a step back, Judge, and ask, so with the Mavundla case, if we use those facts, where would you then say the accountability stops? Because in that case, I remember the clerk was referred for disciplinary action to the Legal Practice Council.
Yes.
I didn't read anything about the principal.
Yeah.
So obviously they lost the case and all of that,
Yeah.
but is that really where the accountability should have?
The accountability starts with the person that puts in the prompt. And it stops with the person continuously that presents under a signature that document. Remember, it is not AI that is a member of the bar
Yeah.
or an attorney.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not AI, it's you. AI is just a tool. So you are responsible. So, Jacques, I think, to answer your question, I think there should be responsibility right through.
Right through.
From the person that puts in the prompt to the person, like in the case of Martha, where even the correspondent that did not bother to read the heads of argument was also fined $5,000 because he had an obligation. So it's a good question. I would say that. It is, in my view, the last part, clear that the above mentioned principles should be expanded to include that the court should also be able to assume and rely on counsel's tacit representation that authorities cited and relied upon do actually exist. We cannot have a court system where we cannot rely on submissions that are made. Okay. Despite promises by ChatGPT of legal efficiencies and benefits within the legal sector, it's not known for its reliability, as often information produced in response to prompts has been shown to be fabricated or fake, especially when such prompts relate to legal information. Legal practitioners should not mislead the court either intentionally or negligently. It confirms what we already spoke about. Please go and read Mavundla. All right, confidentiality and privacy. I'm now done with hallucinations. I think you understand how it works. When a client, now I'm with confidentiality, when you paste client facts, contract terms or case details into a public-facing AI tool, that information may be used to train further models, depending on the provider's current terms. This is a potential breach of duty of confidentiality to the client, even if no specific harm results. Remember that the legal practice, the Code of Conduct, tells us this. You can go read it. Let me see if I can find it. I don't want to waste your time. It's somewhere here. But information is confidential in terms of the Code of Conduct, and you might breach this, and also in terms of the POPI Act. So think carefully before you copy and paste client information into a chat bot, because that information goes to a computer, it is changed into figures and data, and it remains there. And remember what I told you in the beginning? It saves that question. And it saves its answer. Even if you do not do thumbs up or thumbs down. It builds statistics on how many times did I get this exact same question and what was my answers. So it's all about statistics. It keeps that data. Of course you can turn it off, but who can tell me in this room, you know where to turn it off? On ChatGPT you can go and say, no, do not use my data as training. If you don't do that, it goes to this open model.
Did not know that's an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I speak about POPIA,
Yeah.
and I speak about the EU rules. There's rules in the EU. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Practical guidance. Enterprise versions do have contractual protections, but then you must know how to use it. Remember, they hide it away because it's in their interest to train their models. Every day, each question is trained. So if everybody puts it off, they will not be able to train their model. So it's purposefully hidden away. And you struggle to find it in the documentation. Go and try ChatGPT tonight. And you will see it's difficult. There's a small button. Turn it off. Okay. Now, who are these people? They use ChatGPT? No. I want to explain bias. And it's a bad thing. The woman on the left, Brisha Borden, she was in Fort Lauderdale in California. She and her friend walked down the street. They realized that they were late to pick up Borden's niece. So they saw a small BMX bike, the small ones, you know, and one of those push scooter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she and her friend took the BMX bike and the push scooter down the street. And the woman whose children it was their toys, saw them, called the police.
Yeah.
So they were just having fun. They never intended to steal it. They were joyous, having fun. They were arrested. The value of the items which it did not even steal was $80. Now, on almost the same time, Mr. Vernon Prater, which is a white guy, he stole $80 worth of stuff from Home Depot. So in America, they have a system where they feed in demographic information to AI. And that AI then determines a score. And where you lie in that score is considered by the judge when a decision is made to grant you bail.
Sure.
And now, Ms. Borden did not get bail because the system said she will reoffend. Because she's black, she had a juvenile one thing on her name, her age, and so forth and so forth. The system said she's not allowed to get bail. Whereas Mr. Vernon Prater, who had previous convictions for robbery, the system said he's white, this is his age and his profile, he will not abscond, he can get bail. Guess what? Ms. Borden never reoffended. And a few months later, Mr. Prater reoffended and is in prison for robbery. Now that is the real danger. LLM models will be based if the training upon which, the information upon which they are trained are biased. Now they did the same study by taking white people and black people to consider the same factors. If Ms. Brisha Borden will get bail or not. And it is very strange that the research showed that black people would give almost the same score as the model. And they are still figuring that out. But do you know why the jury system was abolished in South Africa? Because juries convicted black people more often than white people. Now imagine that in society there is bias. And this is only a crude form of bias. There's many other biases. So if the model is trained on information that is biased from the start, you will get biased answers. But luckily there are models that you specifically train to get rid of bias. So this is an example of bias. Now imagine I spoke about, that is the Compass case study, I show it there.
May I ask there? So, in other words, AI is used judgments? Because it's one thing to say AI can be used for argumentation and to build an argument, but to use AI for judgments.
It's a very good question. It is not used to build judgments. I'll show you where one judge said it's a jolly good thing. And he was open about it, the judge in Britain. But
yeah.
it's not used for judgments. But this study shows that it's part of the whole process.
Yeah.
So, in this instance, it was only bail. But remember the consequences of not getting bail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult to consult with your attorney.
Well, your liberty is taken
Your
away.
liberty is taken away. So, it's not that judgments will be biased. It is whenever bias enters any place in the system, there's a problem.
But that is literally giving a computer human attributes to make a decision.
Yeah. You can never take the human out of the loop. I will speak about that later, but we are getting to a stage where certain decisions will be taken by computers. But we are not there yet. So let me be clear. AI do not write a judgment without the input of a judge. It is not an automated system. Because this can happen, and also obviously hallucination. But there's a more deeper problem with bias in our country. We spoke about it this afternoon, that the models, American models, do not know indigenous law.
Yeah.
So they are never trained on it because indigenous law is not on the internet. Let's call it easy. It's easy. It is in suitcases, Jacques told me.
Yeah.
So automatically the model will forget indigenous law. So therefore we can say that it's biased against European law. So that is one of the dangers. So it's reliability and accuracy and also bias. Now let me just conclude on that one. AI has language models has a training date, and then lots of work is done for it to start training again. Then it has a training date, and so it goes on. Because it cannot look up things, it relies on what it has trained up to a certain date, and that is the danger. Whereas you must make a proper system that does the AI thing, but also looks up things and incorporates it in the answer. Then you are covered. But general AI does not work like that. The duty of care does not change because you used AI. You applied the information, you are signing the document, you are accountable for the advice. The tool is not a member of the bar. Okay? Topic 3. What's the time? I'm so sorry. What's the
10
time?
past
Step by
7.
step.
Okay, all right. So core insights is that critical for South African and African jurisdictions, we do not have training data on those more nuanced legal systems. It is UK-centric and US-centric. And also our languages are underrepresented. So it must be treated with caution. Ethical and responsible use in legal practice.
Yeah.
Now, how many of you that are practicing will be transparent enough to say, client X, I used AI. And I only used 1 minute. I don't think so.
And
Yes.
I have a question on this one, which I think links to what you spoke about earlier about the POPIA and information, etc. But I think it links more here is, what about privilege?
Yeah.
Meaning, my client tells me I murdered my spouse, and I feed AI all of this information to help me prepare for trial. What does that do to privilege, client attorney privilege, planning for trial, not giving the opponent information about the trial, preempting
You see, in America they view it like this, and that's what I spoke about. When you enter client details in a chatbot, it goes to the open world. Americans say you tacitly waived your privilege.
Mm.
So if the other side realizes, because it sees in your pleading, wow, this is AI. It asks you, did you use AI? Yes. What did you give AI? No, this version.
Only one.
Poof, privilege waived. They are entitled to all the information. So that is what the Americans say, and it was most recently. I don't know what our courts will say about that, but it appears right to me.
No, courts haven't been confronted with it yet.
No, no, no. So you must disclose it to your clients. That is the ethical thing to do.
On the question of reliability and really tracing back your footsteps in terms of research, wouldn't it be a suggestion to request or to almost direct that when you quote a case, that you also provide the case, you add it in a
Exactly.
bundle the same way you would do in the SCA, for example.
Exactly.
Cases that's non-reported, that you provide proof of that.
Exactly, and that is what Americans now require in some of the states.
Okay.
That you must tell. I sourced this case on with AI, and this is the link, so that it can be verified. So it's important.
Yeah.
It's very important, but it will never happen if you're not honest about it.
Should we not rather say you should bill less, because the client can come to you and say, this is my preliminary research that I've done myself, the same as you can do it, and this is, I've put in my facts into the computer,
Yes.
this is the answer.
I-
You just need to verify it.
It's very difficult because charging is difficult to speak. No, difficult to figure out because will you charge a client 10 hours to draft a 4-page particulars of claim because you can't type very fast?
True.
You will not. You cannot do that.
Because you'll admit,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's not. You cannot live with your conscience.
yes,
So people look at what is the standard of, let's say, a 4-page founding affidavit or whatever, and then charge according to that.
Mm.
So that is a difficult one, and we have to discuss and think about this
yeah.
deeper about this because this change is coming. So first of all, one would think about this, that you have to disclose to your client that you used AI.
Judge, may I also ask, and this is another question, do you foresee that soon in the future we will use predictive sentencing in South Africa, where we'll say, this is the facts of the case, please provide us with a sentence that aligns with other cases comparatively? In other words, that we almost take away the discretion of a sentencing court.
You can never take the discretion away from a human that have to sentence a human, because it's a human thing. A computer cannot look in the eyes of an accused and see the real regret or the absence of it. And we all know that things like that may influence a sentence. A person does not utter words that he does not have any remorse. So it's no words, but his whole demeanor shows it. A computer will not be able, I'm telling you. You can get comparative cases to say, look, culpable homicide, these are the facts, look at comparative cases. But that is not where it stops.
Yeah.
That is always just a guide. That this is the benchmark. I will have to look somewhere at other factors. So I don't ever think. There's a movie that I saw one time where a system investigates, tries and sentences. It is a future thing. But it was a big problem that was presented. So human in the loop will always be there. Because a computer sees figures, not words. A computer is not a human. Okay, the core principle is human in the loop. That is the core principle. Now, you must go and look at what obligations apply. I'm going to go quickly through the slide because we dealt with it. There's American rules, and then there's our LPC rules competence, confidentiality, supervision, candor to the court. Disclosure to clients. I think clients are increasingly asking, are you using AI in my matter? You need to be prepared with an honest answer. And I've told you some courts require disclosure. In America, there's no bar rule yet which requires disclosure if you use AI. But the courts have already implemented it. So the courts are in the forefront of that. And then what I forgot just now is that you must satisfy, if you use AI, that a human attorney verified it. So it's the principle of human in the loop. There's a standing order with this Judge Starr in Texas. And there must be AI disclosure. In our court, that court can regulate its own process, so it might be that some judge decides, no, if you use AI, you shall disclose it. Because they can arrange their own process. Every legal step requires a human review. This is not optional. The justice system is a high-risk use of AI that requires particular human oversight. Now, this is how it must work. AI drafts, the attorney reviews, the attorney signs. AI suggests, attorney decides, AI researches, the attorney verifies. And then I've spoke about automation bias. It's a real danger. And I've given explanations of that. Core insight, we are almost done. The AI-enabled attorney does not charge 8 hours for research. That took 30 minutes. They charge appropriately for their judgment, experience, and accountability. That is what clients are paying for. Clients are not paying attorneys to type. Now, machines can do it now. They are paying for judgment, experience, and accountability. So we must make a mind shift. How we will do that, I don't know. But critical insights, you are not reviewing AI output to find errors. You are reviewing it because you are the legal professional. And the output is your professional responsibility the moment you use it. So forget about focus to see if AI made a mistake. You review it because it's your duty, not to find mistakes. It's important to note that generative AI, like all forms of AI, lacks the capability to understand its output and meaning in the same way as humans do. Remember the example of Martha and Mr. Swartz? AI did not understand that Mr. Swartz really wanted to know, is there a real case like this? Did not. There was a disconnection. Okay? This means generative AI cannot automatically validate or audit the accuracy of its results. It may even create false outputs. You saw that. Because Swartz asked, is this a real case? AI said, of course. We have professional obligations, and we must look at people who we are supervising that are using AI. That's critical insights. I'm ending with strategies to adapt to a rapidly evolving environment. Each firm or each person must decide on a framework for evaluating what tool you are going to use. You can only evaluate it if you understand how these different tools work. We have to develop our skills. We must manage client expectations and billing because it's going to catch us. We must stay current. Do not abdicate real research for AI. And we must consider legal practitioner's position. So I want to focus on one thing. So this is just what you should look at. Grounding. Is this thing grounded? Is it taught properly, the LLM? How does it handle data? Does it go to the open world or is it confined? What jurisdiction is it trained on? How current is it? And how can what I do be audited? That is what you should consider. Now, this is the skills we have to develop now, and I think that's the end of my presentation. But let's focus on this. Prompt engineering. Remember what Mr. Swartz asked the AI? Argue that this is the position. He should have asked, we should have done this. He should have said, you are an expert legal researcher. Because then the AI understands its role. Then you say, you shall never hallucinate. And you must tell me if you can't find sources. Be honest. Literally, this is what he should have typed. Now, research the Montreal Convention on the Tolling of Bankruptcy. And give me your analysis. So that should have been the prompt. Prompt engineering is a thing that we have to understand, but we need a system that does this prompt engineering for us, and there are systems that do it.
Yeah.
Okay? Critical evaluation. Treat every AI-generated citation, summary, or draft as unverified until you've checked it yourself. Understanding AI limitations by task. AI is good at summarizing, drafting in known formats, identifying patterns, first draft generation. AI is unreliable for precise current citations, calculations, novel legal questions, or local law. Data literacy, understanding basic concepts, training data, retrieval, augmented generation, fine-tuning makes you a smarter consumer of AI products. So you must go and look for products that are trained. And that is to take away from this. I'm not going to dwell too much here because we are far advanced already. Your value judgment, advocacy, and relationship is what counts for a client. Not the hours you spent on routine research. So the fact that you can advise properly, that you take accountability, that you have knowledge and the skills to present the client in court because he or she does not have it, that is what you are paid for. We have to make a shift, I think. Okay. An important thing is before you engage clients and use AI, it's perhaps a large corporate client like a huge bank and so on, they might have their own AI policies and don't infringe that. So one must always ask, what is your AI policy, and don't infringe on that. AI will not replace lawyers. It will replace lawyers who do not adapt. The core legal skills, judgment, advocacy, ethical reasoning, client relationships are not automatable. So there you have it. Judgment, advocacy, ethical reasoning, client relationship are not automatable. The administrative and research tasks that consume most of your junior lawyer's time are heavily automatable. So instead of junior lawyer typing into Safely, wherever LexisNexis and search topic and then reading 5,000 search hits, AI can do it within seconds. This creates both a threat to those who rely solely on billable research hours and on an opportunity to those who redirect their time to higher value work. Professional bodies will codify requirements. The prudent practitioner gets ahead of the regulation. And that's where we are now. We must understand that we are part of the knowledge economy. 37% of people believe that AI will take all attorneys' work. 47% believe that they do not, and the rest are undecided. So we have a risk. And the reason we have a risk is because we do not work with our hands.
Yeah.
It's a knowledge. It's all about communication. I want to stop with this. Imagine that language to the human race is like Windows, the operating system for computers. Every day, every moment, even if we sleep, we dream in language. Nothing we do does not involve language. So language is the human race's operating system, like Windows is for a computer or Apple. So that is the end. Thank you so much. Sorry it took so long.
No, not
Thank
at
you,
No,
Jacques.
thank you so
Not
much.
at all.
Thank you.
This
and
is amazing.
Wow, that
Yeah.
was very insightful. I think there's a couple of minutes for some more questions.
Yeah.
Ines, I know you've been monitoring the online platform.
What should we focus on in training, in preparing future legal practitioners for AI? What can we
Yeah.
do to better prepare our graduates for
Yeah.
practice using AI?
you will not be able to prepare any junior or student on AI if you do not prepare the student on the basics of law.
Yeah.
Because how will the student measure AI that does not understand anything but figures and cannot correct itself if you do not have knowledge of the law? So your work in whatever form can never stop. Because imagine taking a person that's now in grade 12 and tell that person, okay, give me, investigate the Montreal Convention on tolling in bankruptcy.
No, they will.
He will believe ChatGPT because it looks so believable. I showed you. So there's no knowledge to test the answer. So before we start training students and professionals to use AI, they must train the law.
Makes sense.
Yes, ma'am, there is a
Yes,
question.
there's a question.
So, Judge, you spoke about also reliability and credibility, and you mentioned databases such as LexisNexis, and we know they're using Protege now as their AI tool.
Yes.
So, how safe can we rely on these AI-generated tools within these databases? Because
Yes.
it's a low AI
Yes.
tool.
Yes.
So, can we fully rely on it?
Yes. There is a study we cannot. There is a study that's conducted by Harvard. I'll give you the references. That, and it's independent, that Lexis, Westlaw, and those known platforms hallucinated 47% of the time.
Sure.
And you know why?
Sure.
It is because of training. How the systems work, but if you care about it, I will email my sources to Ines, and the whole study of Harvard is there. An interesting thing, I forgot about it, that can AI replace an attorney? Well, in Britain it has already. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an attorney that was in 2025 for the first time in the history admitted as an attorney by their rules by the Solicitor Regulatory Authority. That attorney's name is Garfield. So what happens is, the attorney, which was a normal attorney, as part of a firm, his brother-in-law was a plumber. And the brother-in-law had always bothered him with unpaid small invoices. So to go to an attorney and pay for it is too expensive. You do not recover the money that you are owed. But there is also a small claims court. So this attorney referred his brother-in-law to the small claims court. Now what Garfield does, it only does small claims court matters. So it's pay as you go. And the important thing is that the Solicitors Regulatory Authority authorized that AI attorney to practice. So, the client sends Garfield, the client is a plumber, sends Garfield the invoice. Garfield uses AI, extracts the information from the invoice, and then the AI asks the client, do you want me to write you a letter of demand? Because that is a requirement in terms of British law, the Act on Small Claims. Client says yes. Garfield says, oh, you owe me £2.50. Client pays £2.50. Poof, here comes the letter of demand with instructions. You will serve this letter of demand per registered post. Then Garfield diarizes this date because the letter of demand which Garfield drafted says you must answer in 21 days. If the client does not upload the creditor's answer, Harvey accepts that there was no answer. Sends a mail to the client. Well, there was no answer. I think we should now issue summons in the small claims court. Do you want it? Yes. Okay, pay me £7.50. Poof. £7.50. And that Garfield takes the small claims court client through the whole process, and at the end, at the cost, even prepares argument. So there you have it. But you must understand that what skill and novel law is applicable there?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. It's a simple process. It's an invoice, a letter of demand, no response, particulars of claim, analyzing a plea, making argument. But sorry, John, but the awesome thing is that attorney directly connects to the land claims court system.
Yeah.
So it's all electronic. We are going there.
But so if am I then correct in saying the following, that so the message to law students is clear. You will not be able to rely solely on AI in your career one day. You will still need to know the law, understand the law, to be able to use these tools effectively. At the same time, for us as educators, as higher education institutions, for our students to be employable, it's inevitable that they are entering a job market where they will be confronted with these tools on the one hand, but maybe even pretty soon expected to use these tools. I mean, firms are adopting these technologies on an increasing basis. So a lesson then to be learned, but it's going to be, of course, on us to teach them how to use it responsibly.
Yes.
Don't you think the main skill would be for them to be able to say, I'm evaluating and I know that this is not right? The ability to understand what is correct and what is not correct. Not so much to generate the knowledge, if I may quote Kirsten Krauss, but to evaluate
You are right, Ines.
the knowledge.
You are so right, but this is the issue. You will have to teach your students to be cleverer than AI. Because how will you know if AI is wrong if AI can pretend it's right? So there has to be this education and training.
Yes.
Because how will, without education, you know what happened in that case I showed you? That is but the bare minimum is that the student must at least understand the principle which is communicated by the AI and know where to find the resource to check it.
We can continue this conversation for hours. I see there's one more question over there.
Judge, my question relates to generative AI, where you can generate pictures and videos. Yes, for now you can see it's AI, but I fear moving forward we won't tell the difference. So what do you think, what impact do you think that will have on the evidence presented in court, and how do you think we can safeguard that against that?
You see, it's a very good question, but evidence cannot appear out of nowhere. Think about this. There cannot be evidence about an accident without that accident happening. Okay? So now if AI says, oh, a picture of this accident, it will be your responsibility to check. Go to that street corner which is depicted there. I'm using an example. Do research and see if there was at that time and that place an accident. Your question connects to what is happening in the criminal law in the UK. Now, they use authorized AI tools for criminal discovery. And you know why? Have you seen TV programs? The entire UK or London has cameras. So you cannot move there without the camera catching you. Now remember, a person commits a crime. That camera evidence is evidence. So prosecutors and also defense were confronted with massive and massive and massive amounts and hours and hours and hours of video for perhaps only 2 seconds of a thing happening. So there they use AI. So the discovery process of prosecutors and the defense, they use a tool, the AI tool. So what I want to say is that one can never create something that does not exist in the real world. You can try and fake it, but so you can fake anything. But there must always be a groundedness.
If I may ask on Valile's question, so would one have to call an expert to verify the authenticity of, for example?
Yeah, Ines, it's a good question. Remember, we must understand, I'm back, that it is only figures.
Well,
It is not a picture that's in that brain of the computer. It's that calculation, that thing I gave you, algebra. It's only thing that it sees. Pictures, videos, words, whatever. Okay, so every time that program does a calculation, with that, a thing is saved, they call metadata. So we do not see metadata, but let me tell you, on each Word document you type, there's a thing you can click that show you the metadata. It shows you every keystroke you made. So for every AI generated thing, there is in the background that nobody sees metadata. And that metadata will show exactly what calculations were made. And it can be traced back, I think, to whether it's real or not, or whether a picture like this was manipulated.
What type of expert would one call for that, practically?
I don't know, Ines.
I don't know either. That is,
It's uncharted territory.
that is
so
uncharted territory. So it's
know.
maybe a field for exploring to train experts
Yeah,
to be
well,
able to
yeah.
verify the authenticity.
See, that's the thing with this technology. It's
Yeah.
opening up so many different and new avenues and unexplored
Yes.
areas, things that the courts haven't been confronted with. So we don't have precedent on this yet.
Yeah.
Practitioners haven't been confronted with this. It
Yeah.
challenges the law, challenges established legal principles. Yeah, it's endless.
So that's why it's so exciting. But things that are exciting are are more often than not dangerous. So sometimes excitement carries with it anticipation and danger. So we must be excited, but we must know that there is going to be anticipation and danger. But let this not derail ourselves, because we won't able to stop it.
No, we won't. We won't.
Thank you
Ines,
so
is
much.
there any further questions on
No further
online?
questions?
I think then, Judge, thank you so much. This really was so insightful, so valuable, and so timely. We cannot thank you enough. And yeah, like I said, we can continue the conversation for days, I think. But just in wrapping up, for our viewers online, this was really just the tip of the iceberg on this new field, this new technology. Now, at the Faculty of Law, we've identified this. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about these developments, specifically in the legal field, you might be interested in the new short learning program that the faculty has developed in AI and Law Tech Essentials. And Judge Roelofse has kindly agreed to be the facilitator for this short learning program, and it covers broadly everything that he touched on tonight, from an introduction to AI to how you can bring it into your practice for practice management, ethics, professional legal practice, new emerging legal technologies. As I mentioned earlier, he developed his own large language model, legal research assistant. So he really has that insight knowledge into this. For those of you interested in this, you are welcome to contact my office. My email address is mattiajl, MATTHEEJL @ufs.ac.za. And with that, thank you once again for tuning in, watching the webinar. We appreciate it. We appreciate the time. And yes, have a blessed evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Elise. Guys!
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I think that